Hello and welcome to the Family Audio Podcasting Project. My name is Tom Stranad. I'm the lead digital artist of the Creatorspace, and today is part one of the Family Audio Podcasting Project. So we're going to explore how to create an audio podcast with our friends and family, and we'll look at what it means to write an audio podcast. So let's get right into it. So what does an audio podcast consist of? So we have dialogue or narration, and that means what's spoken or a narrator. Then we have music and we have sound effects. So those are the three things that an audio podcast consists of and that we're going to work on as we think of writing a script for an audio podcast. So writing an audio podcast script, what does this mean? So we start with your story or plot. What happens? And the idea is it based on facts or fiction? So if it's based on facts, you're telling a true story, such as a true crime audio podcast. So many of us have probably listened to one like that. That's the idea behind what's called factual. Then if it's fictional, you're telling a narrative story, such as a fictional novel. So if you ever listen to a fictional novel audiobook, that's a fictional narrative story, right? So we're making it up. It's fictional. So those are the two main ideas. We want to start with some sort of a story or plot. What happens and how does it progress? Then what we need to do is write your narration and dialogue. So the narration can be used to describe and tell the story as it happens. For example, once upon a time, or it was a dark and stormy night, that kind of idea, right? So that's the narrator can describe what people look like, what's happening. And this is really important with a narrator because in an audio podcast, we don't necessarily see anything visually. We don't because it's all audio, right? So we need to be able to describe everything through narration, or we'll see in the next part using other sound elements as well. Then the other part of writing it is to add dialogue. So dialogue consists of what different characters are saying when they're saying different things, right? So that's dialogue. So for example, I saw a bird fly by with a big worm in its mouth. That could be something that a character would say, and that's dialogue. So the actual spoken word of a character, that becomes the dialogue, right? So that's those two ideas, writing narration and dialogue. Then we need to be able to add sound effects and music descriptions. So the sound effects and music descriptions are really key. Like I said before, we're not seeing anything. So we need to hear everything in this audio podcast to help us visualize things through sound. So we can describe the sounds or sound effects that we hear. For example, a police siren in the distance, or the rumble of thunder fills the air, right? So we can identify sound effects that will help tell our story. So thunder is important as our characters run in to take shelter in a thunderstorm, right? So that would be important to have that sound effect. We can also describe the type of music that we hear, or the type of music you're thinking of using. So for example, here I wrote, we hear piano music playing a happy tune, right? So these additional layers can help tell the story, right? And it works either for factual or fictional stories, right? So these are the layers that really can add depth to help us visualize, help your audience visualize what you're trying to do in an audio podcast. Remember, it's just sound only. So a sample audio podcast script. So here, let's have a look at what that means. So what I have here, I have just the Family Audio Podcast script set up in a program called Final Draft. You can use any kind of Word document program, notebook, notes, and anything that you can just type in is really all we need. Right, so what I'm going to do is go right into here, and it asks me if I want to be like interior, exterior. It could be a little bit fancier in terms of where I am. So I can say, exterior, forest, and afternoon. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'm going to put a character. I'm going to go narrator, okay, and it was a bright, sunny summer day. Okay, so this is basically what I'm doing is I'm putting this dialogue or what's spoken in the middle, and then I can continue from there. So I can add now some description. So I can say birds chirp in the background. A fly buzzes by. So you can see by describing these sounds, we start to help that audio podcast story come to life, right, through these different sounds. So now what I'll do is I'm going to start a character. So I'm going to just put Julie. Okay. Hey. What type of bird was that? Question mark. Okay. And Frank. I'm not sure, but it sure was fast. Right, so you can quickly see how we have the narrator. We're figuring out where we are. It was a bright, sunny summer day. We're adding some sounds. Birds chirp in the background. A fly buzzes by, and then we have some dialogue. And again, that dialogue is helping explore, what kind of what's happening with our story, right? So it's helping us explore, okay, that there's a bird flying by, and the sound effects help, and so on, right? So from there, we could actually, technically say, we hear a banjo playing in the background. Okay, so from there I can add, like, we hear a banjo playing in the background, and that starts to describe some of the music that's happening, right? So that's pretty neat, right? So that lets us really get into, what our script is, and we can do this anywhere. What we want to do is basically center anything that's being spoken, so narration, dialogue. Then we can describe anything in a regular sentence form, so sound effects, music, and then we put character names, and then we just add what their dialogue or narration is. And that's what we do for a whole entire script, right? So it's pretty fun and straightforward. So again, remember, dialogue, narration goes right in the middle, add character names or narrator, and describe what kinds of sounds we hear, right? So that's what we need to do. So now, part one, this is what we want to have. This is our assignment to do before we get into part two, which is we'll start recording this audio podcast. So here's what you need to do. Get together with family or friends and decide how many people would like to voice parts such as narration and characters, right? So it can be all narration, it could be a whole bunch of characters, you decide. But that's the idea between the two types of characters that can be there, right? So narrator or characters. Then what I suggest is, based on how many people are available for voices, write an audio podcast script to fit everyone in. So for example, if you have a group of 4, you should have 4 voice parts. And for this assignment, I want everyone to create a fictional story. Because with a fictional story, we can really imagine anything, and we don't have to basically, rely on it being factual or true. So anything that you can imagine is possible. So it's a lot more fun and freeing just to start with that fictional format first. Then what we want to do is add sound effects and music descriptions, right? So that's what we need to do. So essentially for part one, we're going to get a small group together, family or friends, and then create voices and write the script for all the people involved in your group. Add some sound effects descriptions and some music descriptions. And that's what we need. So remember, we want to have the dialogue, narration, sound effects, and music. So that's it for this part one of the Family Audio Podcast Project. And join us for part 2 next week, and we're going to learn and talk about how we can actually record all of this audio, so based on the script that we've written. So thanks again. My name is Tom Sternad. Thanks for joining us at the Creator Space, and I'll see you next week.